Hey, welcome to the very last Just Salvos webcast.
Ho, ho, ho!
Well, and also welcome to almost Christmas. It's been 2 amazing years. We're only a few days away from Christmas. As we reflect on all of that, Jen Peterson, what's been some of the standout moments for you in our webcast series?
We have just met so many amazing people, and some of them were a little bit famous, which was exciting. But I just really loved meeting people who were just out there in the field doing the work. And it was just great. It was such a privilege to meet so many people who were touching the lives of really vulnerable and marginalised people.
Yeah, I think actually for me last week's episode with Mark Brett was one of my favourites because it was great to have a real solid grounding in the Bible about why we do what we do and why we should unashamedly be proud of seeking justice and seeking a just and amazing godly world. We were going to talk to a very popular guest, in fact our most watched guest this afternoon, but unfortunately we're having some technical difficulties. I'm also having some speech difficulties. Jarred McKenna has been one of our most regular and also most viewed guests. So we're going to have a quick look now at a few minutes from our interview with Jarred McKenna from this time last year. Well, Jarred McKenna, we're here. We're going to talk about Christmas. We've promised the viewers that we're not going to talk about Christmas in the usual way we talk about Christmas. We're actually going to start by talking about war. That's
Why would you do that?
That's a good
Christmas
question.
is a story of peace and hope.
Is Christmas a story about peace and hope, though? Is it? You told me it's not.
Well, I'm just saying that it all starts with an angry, angry king that tries to kill lots of small baby children. Tell us about that.
Wow, what a lead. So in terms of the angry king, we're in Matthew's Gospel for that telling. And so Matthew's Gospel is far more kind of Jewish in its, well, they're both thoroughly Jewish, but he's writing much more to an audience that's framed by kind of Pharisaical Judaism. And so the connection for Matthew's audience is, okay, we're Jews, they're talking about a king who's killing babies. We've heard that before. So the instant association is...
Pharaoh.
Yes.
Killing Moses.
Yes.
In a basket.
You guys are brilliant. If we had a flannel graph, this would be fantastic. So the instant association in Matthew's Gospel is of a king and an empire that oppresses God's people. And that, in fact, the story works that God's people are actually found as the oppressed. And God is working throughout history. And so in Matthew's Gospel, there is a strong sense that Jesus is this new Moses. And so how the story is functioning is that it's about the clash in Matthew's Gospel between current day pharaohs and the pharaohs we've known in the past and God's alternative to empire, which is this child. So some of my favourite philosophers, if at the risk of looking like a total nerd, there's a dude named Kierkegaard. And he talks about, this is the joke of Christianity. And he, Slavoj Žižek, which is another philosopher, and he's Slovenian, and his name's hard to pronounce, he would say that, quoting Kierkegaard, that we miss the joke of Christianity. The joke is that we expect a king to come in riding on a horse. And Kierkegaard put it as what we get is a little dog runs into town. That the manger is actually, this is what God is like. So the Easter stories and the connection to war is in fact, how does transformation happen in our world? Because empires and pharaohs and kings, they think transformation comes through, well, the Roman Empire would put it through peace through victory. I.e. their victory is, we crucify all of you who don't go along with us, and that's our victory. We conquer all of you. Our way of conquering, our one way, our way of salvation is the sword, and Caesar is Lord. And here's this story about a Lord who comes in a manger, whose power is seen in the cross, whose victory is not this conquering others but serving others. And I mean, for Salvos, this rings true straight away because you're so in active service.
What about, we can look at some modern day context, obviously we can look at Afghanistan, we can look at Iraq. If we're to believe the media, WikiLeaks is telling us that we're all paranoid about China and that maybe America's going to have to step in and show some force there. How can we apply that story to our understandings about some of those situations?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we sing it every year, you know, glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to all. And we don't often connect that so glory, doxa, where glory comes from, is actually associated with beauty. That glory is about God's beauty. And so here in this narrative, in both Luke and Matthew, we have glory associated with the beauty of God and its peace. Yeah. And so the question for us is, well, are we going to go with the peace that comes via Caesar, which is what empires did in the past and it's what they continue to do today? Or are we going to go with the strange foolishness of the cross and this way of conquering, where we preach Christ and Him crucified, which will be a stumbling block? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have to connect the fact that what we see in the manger, this kind of power, is the same power that we see on the cross and the same power we see in the resurrection. And that's the power that is to be at work in our lives. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not the power of being on the side of the crucifiers and playing chaplain to them, but being on the side of the crucified. So in a very practical sense, it means the kind of revolution where we turn the cheek in such a way that we're not letting people walk all over us, but we're standing up and saying, I won't let you name me as part of your empires, as part of your world, but I've been named by a new identity. I have a new reality.
How does that look practically? I mean, what are we supposed to do in a situation where, you know, we need to go and help maybe those. So let's take Rwanda or something.
Yeah,
you know, I can't help but watch Hotel Rwanda and go, where were we? Why didn't we go and just kill everyone? You know, I want to do that. And and yet we know that we are supposed to sort of rock up as this baby Jesus. So what?
where's the middle ground?
How do we do it practically? I'm a really practical person. How does it look?
And when people often hear peace, and often some people like Dr. Martin Luther King will even use a term like nonviolence, and they hear even the word itself is incredibly unhelpful because you hear absence of violence. But as Dr. King would put it, what's at the centre of the ethic of nonviolence is love. That love isn't a passive thing, that love is an active thing. So what it looks like is Jesus. So we are dramatically involved and interventionist, if you want to use some fancy terms I can't spell, in these situations. But we intervene in ways that actually look like Christ. So a brilliant example that I had the joy of starting initiate conversations around them in Australasia is the Christian Peacemaker teams, who I was with in Chicago earlier this year, where these are Christians that say, we want to get in the way of Jesus. And being in the way of Jesus, we want to get in the way of this kind of violence. But literally there in Hebron, one of the Christian Peacemaker teams was killed in Baghdad after being kidnapped. So they put themselves in these situations and witness to something that is an alternative. So instead of having guns, like the UN in Rwanda, and not actually getting involved. You get involved but without the guns. And so this is where I think Salvos particularly, with all their language around war, which fits so well with kind of Ephesians, if we understand that in Ephesians, in the New Testament, this war language is actually supporting, subverting rather than supporting how they understood war and all the rest, that Salvos are positioned in quite an amazing way to swing into action for the God of peace, who, as you know, Thomas Merton would put it, is never glorified by war.
Well, there we go. A little look back at this time last year, talking to Jarred McKenna. Jen, for you, the outgoing Social Justice Director of the Salvation Army here in Australia, Southern Territory, what does a just Christmas look like?
That is a really good question, difficult question, because really, does it mean that everybody gets a big roast dinner and some presents under their tree on Christmas Day? Maybe it does, but I think for me it just means that everybody has the opportunity to experience joy and to experience connection with somebody else. And I think community is really what the Christmas story is about. When we look at, you know, even Jesus' birth and all these random people, you know, who don't belong together, all coming together to celebrate a baby's birth. And it could be just because my daughter's just been born.
Hey.
But, you know, it's an exciting time of celebration when a baby comes into the world. And so for all different people to come and share community together, not because they're supposed to come together, but because they want to and it for a shared purpose. And I just love that. I love the idea of people coming together and just being able to be accepted and included in community. And so for me, at Christmas time, I just wish that everybody had a place that they could feel safe and a place that they could call home and share that with people who might be strangers to them, but people that they can call brothers and sisters. And I think that's really what the kingdom of God's all about.
May it be so.
What about you? What is your perspective of justice and Christmas?
For me, it's the same thing. I think we've put a lot of emphasis on the commercial stuff of Christmas. It's all about buying the coolest toys and
Santa. We said look a bit ridiculous saying these things in Santa outfits.
Where do we find Santa in the Bible? That's somewhere, isn't it? That's why we're dressed like this.
Yes, surely.
No, obviously
Revelation.
not.
Revelation.
That's the stuff that gets to me. That when we look at what the real meaning of Christmas is and what the real meaning of Christ is, we've got to look more broadly than perhaps we do. We've got to look more broadly than some of the moralistic issues that come along with saying, well, I want to put the Christ back in Christmas. For me, if I hear someone say, I want to put the Christ back in Christmas, I want to hear them also say, I'm fighting for us to do our best to end homelessness. I'm fighting to see a just and pure asylum seeker policy brought in this country. I'm fighting to see the horrific gap between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people lessened on every single scale. That, for me, is what it means to be bringing the Christ back into Christmas.
Yeah, forget what I said. Just go with what
I'd love to see. I'd love to see some of that. Maybe one day.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And I think the other beauty of the Christmas story is that it's a story of hope. It's a story of new beginnings. And I think that, you know, this Christmas we can actually dream that our society can be different, that all of those things that frustrate me, that all those complaints that we get, all those, you know, people calling us right-wing and all that other stuff, that can just fade away and we can go, you know what, it's not about politics, it's not about being on any particular side, it's not about liking one group of people more than another. It's actually just about us loving one another and it's a new beginning and we can step into next year with the hope that we will get an even more just Australia than we did this year.
Let's do it. Well, next year you're off to be the Corps Officer of the Salvation Army in Carrum Downs here in Victoria. It's incredibly exciting. You've got some great times ahead, people of Carrum Downs, I'm sure. There'll be a new Social Justice Secretary of the Salvation Army, and I'm sure if you keep your eyes on the Twitter and the Facebook, you'll be hearing from her. Her name is Major Marion Weymouth. So keep your eyes peeled. It has been such an amazing opportunity for us to spend the last 2 years with you. We've met, as we said, some amazing people and covered some amazing topics. We couldn't have done it without the awesome help of our supporters and our team here at Just Salvos, from Esther Atkins, who is possibly the most amazing assistant in the entire world. The boys in the studio at Salvo Studios, Dave Cairns, who's the current director of Salvo Studios, Benny Knopp, who is the most amazing sound wizard, and the incredibly tall Jacob Dyer. Also worth mentioning, past directors of the Just Salvos webcast, Grant Whitehead and Jeremy Green. It's been great working with you all. It's been great having you all join in. Any last words, Jen?
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for joining. You never know, we may even be back sometime soon. See you later. Merry Christmas.